Thanks for watching. This is my first video of model making. It's the Meng early release of the French FT light tank. And look, it's a very beautifully presented kit. This is my first Meng as well. Usually I build Tamiya or Dragon when I do vehicles, and as you can see, it's a very nice kit. Everything's well presented, etc. So I've wanted to do a World War I vehicle for quite a long time, and I decided I'd do the FT, seeing as though it's probably it's one of the most important tank designs in history. It's really the first tank. Um, the the British the British Mark the British tanks are really, I think we can say, big assault guns. They're giant assault guns. They give the name tank to this class of vehicle, but they're not really tanks. They're really giant assault guns. The FT by Renault is really the first tank. It encapsulates everything that we find in a tank today. A turret, a single main gun, the crew positioning, and so forth. And it's quite amazing how much they got the vehicle right from the very beginning. And it's the formula that people have mostly stuck to over the last 100 years. And it's now just over 100 years since this was designed. Yeah, and as you can see, it's a beautiful kit with color and with a color guide and so forth. Everything's very interesting. I'm not going to use a lot of what's in this kit. For example, all this trench plastic. This is for making a trench scene, etc. I'm not going to use that. You perfectly could, and it's all very nicely made. What else to say here? Yeah, the quality of this kit is extremely high, extremely high. But it isn't a kit that you give, I think, your 10-year-old or your 12-year-old as their first model kit, not unless you're going to help them a great deal to build it. As much as it's a small kit with not very many parts, it's still not the easiest build in the world. I'm quite experienced, and I have to say it's just as hard as building, say, a modern Merkava or main battle tank or something like that. And it is small and fiddly because of the size of the vehicle. So as you can see, the parts are really, really beautiful here. Nothing to complain about whatsoever here. They give you a full working suspension. That would be my biggest criticism of the kit as I was building it. That basically I would feel that actually it belongs to the suspension. The way that they've done it belongs to a toy, really, rather than a scale model. And I'd rather they'd simplified that, and maybe it wasn't working as such. But it goes together with quite a bit of pain, but it goes together. It is the most painful part of making this kit. I'm going to make my own crew figures, as you can see here. There's a Tamiya figure for a comparison, and I'm going to make them from putty polymer putty, etc. And the Hotchkiss gun is going to be the main part of the story. And I'm going to use as a color reference a color reference I found on Tank Encyclopedia um, rather than what's in the box. That's a color reference for an early vehicle, early production vehicle, which fits this. This is an early production vehicle from the factory, and the serial numbers on that the color plate that they give match um, this type of early release, early build from Renault. Um, so jumping ahead to some of the interior construction, you can see the kind of thing that it is. I've inserted the seat here temporarily, and I'm going to basically replace that with a seat I'll make myself, because that's really actually, I think, not very correct as far as I could find in photo references. But you can see how quite nicely it goes together. It's not too much of a problem to put it together, etc. And as you can see, it's not a you have to put the sides and everything of the hull together. It's not a bathtub style kit, etc. And that results in extreme detail on the inside of the kit. So if you were to make this as a model that maybe that was destroyed, or a vehicle that was destroyed or something like that, it would be quite easy to do with this kit because everything is super detailed. And you can see now I've replaced that seat with something that's actually more realistic. The seat for these was just basically a, a leather cushion, and that was it. It was probably quite a hard leather cushion, I would imagine. But yeah, it makes a nice model on the interior. The interior comes up very, very nice, as you can see here. And I've used reference. I looked at the FT that the American Museum of the GI has, and used that as my reference for the interior of this vehicle. They apparently spoke to an expert in France when they were restoring their Renault, and I'm pretty satisfied that they probably have the most correct interior of a Renault that is, and probably the most correct restoration of a Renault there is. So if you're in America, I would suggest, and you're interested in the Renault FT and you can get over to the Museum of the GI, go there and have a look at their FT. By all means, it seems to be the one. One of the downsides of this kit, because this is the early production and it's also Meng's first release of this vehicle, is that there's no engine included in this kit. We get everything else but the engine, and that was one of the downsides. So I had to do a little bit of extra building and etc., but that's okay. Most of that's not seen. But you can see how nice the interior comes up. Now these springs, these big suspension springs on the side of the vehicle, they give you hell, frankly. They're terrible to install. I looked at even other modelers and what they'd done with them, and suspiciously, there's well, a big suspicious gap of information. So I suspect that these things drove everybody else crazy as well. If you watch anyone else's build videos of this kit, suspiciously nobody seems to show the building of this part of the model. And I suspect that that's because basically there's too much tears and blood and so forth in it. They look like they'd be nice and straightforward, but they turn out to be rather hellish. Um, and I ended up substituting the springs as well for another type of spring, so they look a little bit more realistic. But fortunately, they're not really seen anyway when it all goes together. But they absolutely hellish. I would say this is the worst part of the kit, but it can't be helped, really. I'd have liked it if Meng had supplied a non-working alternative as well as the working alternative, so that you got a choice of how you were going to put this together. And if you really wanted those springs to work and the suspension to go up and down, you could do that. But if you wanted it to be static, you could equally do that. I'd have preferred that Meng had gone that way with this model. Unfortunately, they didn't. So it's pretty challenging. The turret is pretty easy. Well, I found it quite easy to put together. Quite straightforward if you follow the instructions and you figure out which plate goes together, because it is done in individual plates. I know that some people have criticized the kit for that, but I found no problems with that. Um, and yeah, basically, I found it to be quite easy to put together. Um, and then you can see me right now doing the a little bit of weathering, starting to weather that on the inside. One thing I would say is that I could not find a great deal of information on the actual details of the interior. There's probably more that goes in the turret of one of these things, but I could not find any information on it, and that was a pity. Yeah, I'm using oil here, just things like burnt umber, uh, colors like that, and just putting the oil onto a tissue or napkin in this case actually, to draw out the linseed oil from the paint, and then when I scrub it around, um, it dries quite quickly. Quite equally, you could have used, there's AK Interactive makes, make some pigments for interior vehicle interiors and so forth, and quite equally you could use something like that. But I decided to just go to my oil paint and do it this way. And you can see I just scrub it down and then remove, and that dries pretty quickly if you do it that way and you take the oil out of the paint first. Many people who try oil paints on models complain that the oil paint never dries, and try all sorts of tricks. And basically the simplest way to get it to dry is to first put the oil paint onto something that will soak the linseed oil out of it, and then you can use whatever you want. Um, I think oil paint actually makes quite good stuff for weathering. like this, etc. You can do some quite nice things with it. For the exterior of the vehicle, I decided to go with an a reference I found in Tank Encyclopedia. This is a this camouflage and serial number actually matches an early vehicle, in spite of the fact that that the illustrator has depicted a late vehicle with cast turret. So I've just depicted the same camouflage scheme here with Tamiya acrylic, slightly diluted to make it a little bit better for hand painting rather than spraying. Not diluted very much. It's very good stuff for hand painting these days. When they first brought out their acrylic range when I was a kid, you really couldn't paint with it. It was really quite awful stuff. These days, they've made it really good. And it's really easy to hand paint with this because it's such a small model, and with some and diluting it, I felt like I could get away with hand painting this. And it's really it'd be a very complex paint scheme to do by masking and spraying, as much as I don't mind masking and spraying, but this would be kind of crazy. So I felt like it would be better to do it by hand with a brush. And I think it came up very well. And you can see the beginning of my weathering here as well. Going on to the base, I've made this by putting a piece of plywood and some framework together, and then adding tile grout and white glue together to sculpt this bomb crater, shell crater, whatever you like, and then sprayed that black, and you can see how it's starting to come up and done some indentations, and then initial placement of the figures, and how I think that they're going to go together. So that's how, yeah, just as a preliminary here in how they're going to go together. And in the next video, I'll deal more with the figures themselves that I'm going to make for this. But you can see where we're going, basically, with the um, model, and how I'm planning to position it in the vignette. It's a vignette. So thanks, thanks for watching. This is my first ever build video. I've been building models for 40 years, but I've never actually a little bit more than 40 years, but I've never filmed anything before and put something up. So thanks very much for watching. If this is a success, I'll continue to post more of my videos, and I'm sure they'll get better. This is probably extremely rough today, but you can see where we're going, and we'll cure some of the camera issues, and hopefully it'll get very good after a couple of videos, I think, if you stick with the channel. So once again, thank you for watching, and yeah, please join me for the next installment of this. Thank you.